Welcome back everyone to another Kerbal Space Program video, and in today's Kerbal Space Program video I'm going to be fulfilling and kind of completing the next step of my last video. So if you didn't watch my last video, I sent up a refueling rover to my Mun base, and this is kind of the new series I'm making. But the only problem is I don't actually have an ore scanner in orbit to show where the ore is. So in today's video, I figured it'd be nice to send up an ore scanner, but I'm not going to send it up with a rocket like I usually do and on this channel. I'm going to send it up with an SSTO. So I've not really done SSTOs before. I've made a couple that go into low Kerbin orbit. I haven't put them on the channel, but I've done a few. I'm not really that great at them, and you'll see in this video. You know, just this is like a super inefficient SSTO. I can already tell, and yeah, it took me like hours to just make this design and then finally find something that works, and just had barely enough delta V to make it back to the Kerbal Space Center. So yeah, this is like the first successful SSTO mission I've ever done. I thought it came out pretty well. You know, I like the way that the craft ended up looking, and it completed the mission of sending this payload into a polar orbit around the Mun. But yeah, so it was pretty fun to do. As you can see, we've gotten construction started with the SSTO itself. You can see I just put that Rapier engine in there. The engines on this are, I have 3 Rapiers and 2 nuclear engines. So we have good thrust to weight ratio on Kerbin with the Rapiers, and we also have good thrust to weight ratio in outer space when we're using those nuclear engines. So you can see just attaching some wings here, you know, basically standard SSTO stuff, although like I mentioned, I've not really built many before. The main struggle was just getting enough delta V, because I found myself getting into, like as I was testing this earlier, I found myself getting into orbit fine, but then once I would get into orbit, I would have like nothing left. I would have enough to circularize at the Mun and not enough to return. So, you know, I was just trying to, I was literally experimenting with every single fuel tank, like trying to drain oxidizer that I don't need and testing it and seeing how much I have left, and then draining a little bit more, trying to get as much delta V as I can out of this. And like I mentioned, I ended up coming back with very, very little anyways. But my first SSTO mission, and I think it went alright for my first one. In the future, I'm definitely going to do more, because it was really fun, and it was really a nice sense of satisfaction once I finally completed it and got it nice and safe back to the runway. But yeah, so more about what's happening on screen. You can see I'm pretty much finishing the construction here, just placing in my wheels and placing in those air brakes, which do end up being really helpful in the end. I was actually surprised like how much the air brakes impact you slowing down, especially at high speeds. Like when I was re-entering Kerbin's atmosphere, and you'll see later in the video, I was deploying the air brakes intermittently to, you know, kind of slow myself down, because I thought I was going to overshoot the runway, and they actually really did a good job of slowing me down really quickly. So yeah, so those are really important to the success of this mission. There, I was just turning on and off like some of the functions of those elevons and the rudders. Like if I wanted it, like for instance, I turned off the roll and pitch control on the rudders just because I didn't want anything to happen accidentally. And everything else, I kind of just, I made it the way I wanted it to be, just so we wouldn't have too much control and flip all over the place. But yeah, I kind of talked through the launch. We're starting now. You know, I brought the video down to 1x speed again, so you can get a better sense of how we're doing. I don't know why, because you know, since I've made this mission and recorded it, I've made some other SSTOs and tested them. But for some reason, this one was always like wanted to fishtail around the runway, and the back end was always sliding around a bunch. I was controlling it really well there, because like I mentioned, I've done a lot of tests with it, but I don't know why that was. And yeah, like I mentioned, I've done other SSTOs that don't do that anymore. Maybe it's just I had a lot of weight in the back. That's probably what it is. But yeah, that was just a problem I was encountering while I was launching. The flight profile for this, so basically what I did was I pointed 5 degrees on the nav ball until I hit 440 meters per second, and then the Rapiers unlock their full thrust potential. And then once I hit 400, like so after I had 440 meters per second, I started to pitch up at 10 degrees until I got to 10 kilometers. And then once I got to 10 kilometers up, I now point back down to 5 degrees so we can gain some speed and, yeah, hopefully extend our apoapsis out and extend our trajectory out as far as possible. Because the big thing with SSTOs is trying to get to orbital velocity while using as much of the rapiers as possible. Because for Kerbin, orbital velocity is 2,200 meters per second-ish. So you want to get really as close to that as possible. So once I got to 20 kilometers up, I fired up the nuclear engines just to give us a little extra kick of thrust, and then I just let the rapiers run until they automatically switch to their closed cycle mode. And if you've never flown an SSTO or never made a craft with rapiers, basically they have two modes. They have a closed cycle mode, which uses oxidizer and liquid fuel, which is far less efficient than their air breathing mode, which just uses obviously air and liquid fuel. So you can get a lot more delta V out of the air breathing mode than you can with the closed cycle mode, and that's why you want to use the closed cycle mode for as little bit as possible. But you do end up having to use it in the thinner parts of the atmosphere when there's just not enough airflow, to fuel the craft. Yeah, so now basically what I'm doing is I spent a solid 5 minutes trying to find the right action group, I guess. Basically what I wanted to do is make an action group that would deactivate all of the flap controls, so that while we were in space and I was, using like WASD and Q and E keys to control like the roll, pitch, and yaw of the craft, that they wouldn't be flapping around like this. I didn't find it, and then eventually I did. So yeah, now that won't be like, it doesn't really affect you, but it just kind of looks weird and it bothers me while we're in orbit. But yeah, speaking of orbit, now we're in LKL around Kerbin, and we can start planning our trajectory to the Mun. So we already had we didn't need to adjust our inclinations. So usually when I go for orbits or go for landings around the Mun, I like to make them equatorial. So we'll make our inclination relative to the Mun 0 degrees. But in this case, since we're going to be adjusting it to be to get us into a polar orbit around the Mun for that resource scanner, it would actually be counterproductive to burn with the ascending nodes and descending nodes to get us equatorial, because then we would just have to burn back and use extra delta V to get us in a polar orbit. And I believe the orbital height that I went for was about 150 kilometers. I don't remember if I ended up changing it, but yeah, basically what I ended up doing was I planned a maneuver node on our interplanetary, I don't think it's interplanetary space, intercelestial body space. I planned a maneuver node to basically just pulling on the normal and the prograde marker and retrograde to get us on a polar trajectory. And then what I ended up doing was I used the nuclear engines to get us into this circularization that you're seeing here, or not the circularization, this orbit. It's not quite a circle. But once I got into this orbit, I then detached the satellite and then used the spark engine that you might have noticed I put on there during the build time lapse, and I used that engine to circularize the satellite itself. That way we'd have some extra fuel, or not extra fuel, but just we would save the fuel in the space plane. That way, we would just make sure we have enough for the landing and everything like that. Here you can see I'm getting a Kerbal out on EVA, an engineer Kerbal, which I'm really glad I had, because that resource scanner was like weirdly, like it was lodged between those monopropellant tanks on there, and when I was trying to detach them before, I was trying to decouple the satellite from the space plane, like it was just getting stuck and getting all Kraken attack, and the ship was like exploding. So I had to send a Kerbal out on EVA after many attempts and just slide the resource scanner back a little bit, and that worked on getting us detached. So you can see now we're just basically getting ready to orbit or get ourselves circularized on the Mun. We don't need to be circularized for the resource scanner, but I just prefer circular orbits. I think it just looks much better on the map screen, and yeah, it basically just looks better. That's the only thing. But yeah, so here's the resource scanner. Nothing too crazy. You just have batteries, solar panels, a communication disk to relay the information, and of course the resource scanner. You'll notice I didn't actually have to perform an orbital scan, and that's because I tested this craft in the same save file, and I did a scan around the mud with the previous scanner, and then I destroyed that scanner. So I guess you'll just have to take my word for it that it works. But yeah, I basically didn't even have to do this at all because the data was there from the test that I did earlier. But yeah, that's kind of irrelevant now. So anyways, getting back to what's happening. We see we have the space plane. You might have noticed that we didn't actually have to do an escape burn to get out of orbit around the Mun, and that was pretty fortunate because that did save us quite a bit of Delta V. But the only downside to it was that now we're in a super large orbit around Kerbin. I don't know if this ended up taking more Delta V to get us down to Kerbin, or if it would have taken less to just escape burn the normal way. But yeah, this is what we had to do. I didn't want to have to load a quick save because I think the last quick save I made was when we were in orbit around Kerbin. I have to remember to make more quick saves just for situations like this, or if anything else goes wrong. Like for instance, if I didn't have that engineer Kerbal on, that would have been really unfortunate because that satellite would not have been leaving the cargo bay of this space lane anytime soon. So we would have to restart the whole mission pretty much. But yeah, I guess I got a bit lucky with that. So you made a notice that now we're just circularizing around Kerbin, trying to bring our orbit down in short burns, burning at apoapsis, since that's when we're traveling slowest, that it's most efficient to do our burns where we're lowering our periapsis that way. And I just brought it down to 65 kilometers because that's only 5 kilometers below the Kármán line, which is what separates the atmosphere from outer space. Because I didn't want to go too low into the atmosphere because there'd be a high density in air, and I didn't want to risk overheating. Like I mentioned, I've never done SSTOs before, so I don't know what the best way is. Next time I do one of these, I'll probably try to go lower at first, because we ended up having to do I think 3 or 4 passes, which doesn't sound like a lot, but it just got really monotonous just sitting here doing one pass at a time. I did end up using physical time warp sometimes, just I just didn't want it to take forever. But yeah, that wasn't even the biggest annoyance of doing the landing. The biggest and the hardest part was landing at the Kerbal Space Center. I'm telling you right now, you'll see at the end, we literally just got lucky on that we landed anywhere close to the Kerbal Space Center. Because I didn't know where to aim for. I didn't know how to plan my descent into Kerbin so that we would land there. And as I'm literally doing my last pass, I realize, I go to map screen and I see, oh wow, we're gonna go to the Kerbal Space Center. And then I realize, oh wait, we're not gonna go to Kerbal Space Center, we're gonna end up overshooting. So I do end up doing some crazy backflips, inducing 10 Gs, I'm pretty sure, onto our Kerbals, but they can handle it. They're strong. So yeah, so that's basically what's gonna happen. You can see now we're entering the lower parts of the atmosphere. I believe we're going 2,800 meters per second at 50 kilometers, which you can already see some of those heat markers, I guess. I don't know, temperature gauges. Those temperature gauges are really getting high, and if those get to maximum, whatever part they're resembling is gonna explode. And we really don't want that to be a critical part, like a wing or a cockpit. Basically, we don't want anything to explode, because if something explodes, the craft's most likely going to be unbalanced, or we're going to have a problem controlling it. So we just don't want anything exploding in general. Here, I believe this is the last pass, and I'm not sure. I don't remember, but we're passing over the desert. And yeah, here I lost control of the craft for a second. It was really back heavy, so it was hard to keep the nose pointing in the right direction. So I did use a lot of that RCS. I put RCS on there and a docking port just in case I want to use this cargo SSTO in the future. Maybe make a few modifications to it, but in case I want to use it again, maybe to visit the space station, we can dock there. And yeah, like I was talking about before, a little while back, I realized that we're gonna actually hit the Kerbal Space Center, but I didn't know where to aim. Like, I didn't know if I should be slowing down more, if I'm gonna slow down in time, or if I should slow down less. So what I ended up doing was pointing prograde and then activating all the air brakes. And now I'm approaching this mountain range, and I'm like, okay, let's just land at the Kerbal Space Center, get a little closer. Okay, we gotta slow down now. And then I'm like practically over it, and I'm like, oh god, we're not gonna slow down in time. So I end up like trying to pitch back and just doing some insane, some advanced air braking methods, let's call it that. And I'm just using all the RCS I can right now to nose down on the to nose down with the craft and just try and aim for the runway. But yeah, so at this point in the mission, I'm kind of like, okay, pretty much got it. I just got to stick this landing. And I did a quick save before. I don't know if it showed up. Maybe it was just time lapse too fast. But I'm like, okay, I'm pretty much done. And yeah, here's 1x speed. Just coming to the runway. And in the heat of the moment, when I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm about to do a successful SSTO, my brain must have shut off, because it wasn't until late that I realized, 1, I'm not even aligned with the runway, and 2, my landing gear isn't even down yet. So I end up like deploying my landing gear like within millimeters of hitting the ground. And I believe I turned the camera so you can show it. I really hope I do, because that'd be really unfortunate to miss. Oh, yep, here it is. You could see nearly, oh, that was just so nerve-wracking as it happened. I honestly, there was just a lot of luck involved with the landing back on Kerbin. But yeah, so we're back at the Kerbal Space Center runway. I kind of just had to sit here for a minute and just process that I actually landed back at the Kerbal Space Center and did the mission successfully. I didn't end up having that much Delta V left. I mean, it was just, I was coming really close to the wire on every aspect of this mission. But like I mentioned, it was my first SSTO, so hoping to work on it in the future and get better at it. But yeah, that was the whole video. That went by a lot faster than I thought. I feel like I say that in all my videos. Maybe I should start making them longer. I don't know. But yeah, that was the whole video. I really hope you enjoyed. I was really proud of this SSTO. I think it was pretty good considering it was my first one. Like I mentioned, I'm gonna hope on doing more in the future. And I think my next video will actually be an SSTO. I can't make any promises, but I'm really hoping to do a lot more of these. It was really fun. But yeah, there's a link to subscribe on screen right now, a video recommended by YouTube's recommendation algorithm, and a video I've picked out for you that I think you'll like. But yeah, have a good day. Bye.